Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into something that, well, often feels like a really unwelcome guest, doesn't it? Fear. I mean, most of us instinctively try to avoid it, or maybe conquer it. We tend to see it as this debilitating force, like a huge wall standing between us and whatever we want to achieve. But what if we've kind of misunderstood it completely? What if fear isn't actually the problem we need to suppress, but maybe it's a powerful, even incredibly useful tool? Think about it like driving a high-performance supercar. The car itself, well, it isn't the issue, right? It's our skill, our understanding, and handling it. That's what determines if we crash or if we actually master the road. So our mission today is to really understand the mechanics of this internal supercar.
That's precisely it, yeah. Our deep dive today, it's really designed to fundamentally challenge your common perceptions of fear. We're aiming to uncover how, when you understand it and use it with a bit of precision, fear can actually transform into what we sometimes call a hidden superpower. It's about recognizing that this really potent internal signal isn't something just happening to you. It's more like something happening for you, guiding you towards informed action and, honestly, profound growth.
Okay, so if fear isn't inherently bad, maybe we're just mismanaging it. Let's get a bit more granular then.
Yeah.
What is fear exactly?
Yeah.
Like at its core, we're often conditioned, I think, to see it as some kind of external threat, this big intimidating force looming over us. But if we stick with our supercar analogy, that's kind of like blaming the car for a novice driver's struggles, isn't it? So where does this powerful internal feeling, where does it truly come from?
Well, what's fascinating here, I think, is that fear is fundamentally an internally generated emotion. Now, sure, external stimuli, sudden loud noise, maybe a looming deadline, an unfamiliar person, they certainly provide information, that's true. But that visceral feeling of fear, the one that feels like an external threat or like a struggle happening to you, that actually arises from an internal gap. It happens when your internal knowledge base, your awareness or maybe your wisdom about a specific situation isn't quite complete or adequate. So it's not really an external force acting on you. It's more your own system responding from within, responding to what it perceives as an informational deficit.
Ah, okay. So it's a signal then, a prompt from our own internal systems, which leads to, I guess, a really critical insight.
Right.
For most people, most of the time, the core of fear is simply a lack of information. Is that right? Our minds are these incredibly sophisticated prediction machines, right? Constantly trying to calculate potential outcomes, success or failure, danger or safety. But, and this is the key part, they can only operate on the data they actually possess.
Exactly. And this brings up a really important question. What happens when a vital piece of that information just isn't accessible? Maybe you don't even know it exists, or perhaps you just haven't processed its implications yet. In those moments, your brain, it tries to bridge that gap. It really does. It's kind of like having a puzzle with missing pieces. Your mind instinctively tries to sketch in the blanks, and often it does this based on assumptions or past experiences, or sometimes even worst-case scenarios. This filling in of missing data based on conjecture rather than solid knowledge, well, that's where a lot of internal friction and, frankly, potential problems can manifest. And when you then act on those assumptions, well, the resulting cause and effect can be far from optimal, let's say.
Right, okay, let's explore this. A concrete example might help here. Let's imagine a seasoned investigative reporter. They're working on a really crucial story, and suddenly they realize, uh-oh, I'm missing a key piece of information. Maybe it's a critical witness statement or some vital financial document. What happens then? What's the reporter's internal experience, their immediate impulse?
Right. Well, a good reporter facing that kind of void, they might initially feel a jolt of anxiety. That's natural. But a master reporter, they don't just panic. Instead, that anxiety immediately serves as a very precise signal. Okay, there's a data gap here. Their first response isn't this overwhelming fear of failure, but rather a targeted identification of exactly what's missing. Now, if they were to publish an article filled with inaccuracies because of this gap, well, the public embarrassment and professional fallout would definitely be painful, no doubt. But that pain of embarrassment, it isn't just suffering for suffering's sake. It's actually a harsh feedback loop providing critical data, really critical. It shines a light on why they were wrong, exposing their unknown unknowns, the things they didn't even realize they needed to know in the first place. So the fear then, it becomes the catalyst for doing rigorous due diligence, for expanding their research, verifying sources, and ultimately replacing that faulty narrative with an accurate, well-informed one. The really profound takeaway here is that the answer to understanding fear, And often that sort of trailing anxiety that follows it is simply getting the right specific information. So the advice becomes, don't just get anxious. Get intellectually curious. Get educated about what you don't know you don't know.
Wow, that completely shifts the paradigm, doesn't it? It's not about being fearless, but about being informed. Okay, and here's where I think it gets really powerful. Let's consider a different scenario, maybe one that's more universally relatable for many people, like an individual facing a significant career pivot. Maybe they're launching their own venture or taking on a completely new role in a really competitive field. That uncertainty, I can feel totally paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely. And the fear in a scenario like that isn't just some vague apprehension. Often it's a direct result of the sheer number of unknown variables. Will the market respond? Do I actually have the right skills? How on earth will I manage the finance? Those kinds of questions. Now, if this person approaches that pivot simply with this generalized fear, they might just project their anxieties onto every single potential obstacle, and that can lead to inaction or even self-sabotage. They might anticipate rejection or failure before they even take the first real step, essentially. Well, essentially validating their own fears prematurely. However, imagine if they approach this differently, not as this huge chasm of scary unknowns, but more like a series of specific questions to be answered. So instead of allowing fear to dictate inaction, they actually use it as an internal compass. That feeling of fear points directly to the informational gaps. Okay, I fear I don't know enough about the market, right? That prompts market research. I fear I might lack a specific skill. Okay, that prompts a realistic skill assessment and maybe some targeted learning. I fear financial instability. Well, that prompts meticulous financial planning and risk assessment. You see the pattern. The crucial shift is moving from this broad, undefined anxiety to the active pursuit of actionable intelligence. Specifics matter here. You gather specific empirical data, not just opinions or assumptions, to fill those identified gaps. And when you do this, your emotional state starts to become an after effect of informed decision-making, not some precondition that paralyzes you before you even start. You're no longer approaching the situation raw with all this unchecked anxiety, but with a clearer, more objective mindset, driven by the specific questions your fear actually prompted you to ask in the first place.
So, pulling this all together then, what does this really mean for us day to day? How does understanding fear as essentially an information gap, how does that fundamentally change our relationship with it? How does it transform from something that feels paralyzing into powerful fuel?
Yeah, if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it means that when you truly understand the specific dynamics of a situation and you can clearly identify what information you're actually lacking, fear transforms. It really does. It shifts from being this paralyzing force into powerful directed fuel. It becomes energy for growth, energy for persevering through genuinely difficult challenges, and importantly, energy for strategic action. What's truly fascinating, I believe, is that fear is, at its core, a signal, a very precise prompt, a prompt to gather more data, to refine your understanding, and ultimately to act from a place of informed choice, not just blind, reactive anxiety. It literally points you directly to where you need to learn and adapt.
Okay, so essentially, you've just been handed a new superpower, if you choose to see it that way. So the next time that familiar knot of fear starts to tighten in your stomach, don't just, open the door and let it consume you. Instead, maybe try to engage with it. Urge yourself to ask, okay, what specific information am I missing here? What do I need to learn, or what question do I really need to answer to navigate this situation effectively?
Precisely. Use that fear. Use it as a catalyst for action, for targeted education, and ultimately for empowering yourself. Your ability to understand and master this powerful emotion, to interpret its signal for what it truly is, which is really a call for more data. That ability will redefine your boundaries. And honestly, it can unlock potentials you never even knew you had.
It's pretty incredible, actually, to think about fear not as some insurmountable wall blocking your path, but more like a precise doorway, a doorway leading to deeper understanding and ultimately purposeful growth. Maybe take a moment now, just reflect on your own experiences with fear, and consider a time when, perhaps looking back, a lack of information might have been the true root of your apprehension.
So, what's your biggest takeaway from our deep dive today on fear? Beyond just recognizing it as maybe an information gap, how do you actually plan to use fear as a precise tool in your own life? Maybe think about one specific situation where you could apply this reframing, turning what once felt like a hurdle into focused fuel for inquiry and for action.